So you can use the chat at any time during our recording today. I'll be back and forth between the chat and the content, so I'll be sure to check everybody's responses and things like that. But yeah, what schools are we all from? I want to see where we're at. BSD. I've had quite a few students attend from there. I'm from Gold Coast. Me too. Woo! Victoria Point. Awesome. We've got a bit of a variety. That's good. That's good. That's good. And have you guys done your mock exams yet? Have people finished their mocks? I mean, it's the last day of term, but even still, yeah, finished, all done. Yeah, cool. How exciting. I guess this isn't really holidays for you guys, is it? It's the last stretch before your externals. Crazy to think that externals are in like a month. But it's okay. We will prepare you guys as best as possible to ace those exams. How are we all feeling about externals? That's another question that I want to gauge a little bit. And yours wasn't near conflict. That's a pretty good one. I'm really good with specialist maths. Well, hey, you take the wins as they come. Very nervous with English and stuff like that. That's understandable. So understandable. Yeah. The emojis, I get it. I relate. I have been in your shoes. Like, yeah, it's not nice going into externals, but at the same time, you prepare for them as best as what you can, and you just it's over in 2 hours. I think that's kind of the best thing about external exams is like once you're done that exam, you never have to go back to that subject ever again if you don't want to. So that's something positive to take out of the whole experience, I guess. But even still, the prep, like these next few weeks for you guys are going to be absolutely intense. Is most of you would be doing a 6G pathway, like 5-6G pathway. Have 6 subjects on the go at once is just, it's crazy. Crazy. How many people do we have at the moment? Alrighty. I don't think many, so a few more people might join as we get started, but I'm thinking we will get started now. So, hi everybody. My name is Bronte. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier, but my name is Bronte. I'm the founder and CEO of ATAR Private Tuition. I graduated in 2020, so a few years ago now, but I've been tutoring ever since I graduated. So I've got about 4 years worth of experience under my belt, and you guys can trust that you're in very safe and experienced hands today. I graduated with an adjusted ATAR of 99.95. I did general English, amongst other subjects, but I always found that the support that I got from my teachers just wasn't the greatest, which is why I became a tutor to help kids in your shoes kind of secure that exam success and also the support that you guys need to actually do well in externals. Now, I've worked with around 400 students in my time. What I get in English, I don't actually remember my raw scores. You'll be surprised how quickly that goes in and out. But I just remember my ATAR. That's the important part. I think for my internal assessments, I was sitting on 20, like 100% internal, and then my external, which in 2020, I ended up with like 49, 48 out of 50. Like I did pretty well in my external as well, but that all of that came down to my preparation itself. I've memorized most of my essay before externals and then kind of regurgitated that within the exam. So that's one way to do it. But I put a lot of preparation to English because I knew how much it was like weighted. Do you know what I mean? So even still, I thought, so I guess the reason why we're running this masterclass today is to ensure that you guys have the most skills possible to lead you within externals. Now, before we get started on the content, I want to get a general vibe as to how you guys are feeling about general English mocks. So general English so far. So you guys have done your mocks. You've about to go into external. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are we feeling for external exams at this point in time? Whilst you guys answer those, I'm going to answer some of these questions in the chat. Did you memorize exams covering for different questions? I memorized a few different topics, but it was mainly my quotes and analysis that I used, and I kind of twisted those to the exam question itself. I did a ton of QCAA practice exams, and I think that's what really put me a step ahead, is actually practicing those essays and getting confident in the quotes. Yeah, lacking quote analysis. I feel like that's the most important part, is like knowing how to analyze quotes, and more importantly, having quotes that are flexible across a variety of different themes. You're going to have two questions. You're always going to go with the one that you feel most confident with. But at the same time, if you can prepare for as many themes as possible, you're definitely going to put yourself in the best position to answer your external exam. Let's have a look at these scores. 8, 4, 7, 4, 7, 7, 4s, 5s. I'm scared we're getting a bad question this year. I mean, you'd be surprised. I've predicted the exam question for 3 years now, like 3 years straight. And it all comes down to pattern recognition. Like, obviously, as a tutor, I can kind of read between the lines in that sense. But last year's exam question, I predicted basically word for word. The year before that, same thing. Year before that, same thing. So it all came down to me looking at past exam questions and seeing what they hadn't yet assessed, to then give my students a really, really good understanding of what they could assess. And that ultimately ended up being the exam questions. So I think that's kind of interesting, is like, I think when I was in school, like when I was in your shoes, I had no idea what the exam question was going to be. And that's probably the scariest part about English externals. I mean, loyalty, like, I feel like it's still going to be around the key themes. So, like, in my eyes, key themes within Macbeth are like power, ambition, regret, supernatural, gender. Like, those are kind of the key themes that I see commonly recurring within exam questions. It's about how they actually phrase those exam questions that ultimately determine how you're going to answer the response. But yeah, it's good to see that some of you guys are feeling quite confident. And for those of you that aren't, I'm hoping that that will change by the end of today's session. So today we're going to be covering a few different things. We're going to go through some general context first as to what Macbeth is based upon, and then move that into some themes and then some quotes as well. Now, within the quote section, I'll be highlighting to you guys the literary devices that are used within each quote, and also the analysis as well. I'm not doing Macbeth. This could be rough. What? This is a Macbeth masterclass. So we are only going to be focusing on Macbeth. Oh, that's a shame. Othello, I do have a bit of content for Othello, but today's all about Macbeth and for my general English kids. So I encourage you to go on to QSH. There'll definitely be some resources there in terms of Othello prep and things like that. But yeah, what else do we have here? Oh, we actually have quite a few more people arrive. That's good. For those of you who haven't answered so far, I wanted to get a general gist as to how you're feeling for general English so far. On a scale of 1 to 10, you've done your mocks, you're about to prepare for externals. How would you rate your preparation so far, with 1 being the worst and 10 being, I'm on top of things? So drop it into the chat. I want to see your vibes. 6. We've got another 6. But most of us are sitting between 5s and 7s, which is good. That's solid. That's like 50 to 70% when you put it into percentage. So I'm pretty happy with that. Anyway, diving straight into things. So quotes we'll go over, particularly with the literary analysis, and then also within the themes themselves. I'm really going to emphasize to you guys the importance of flexibility in your quote selection. I know kids who have gone into exams with, say, 20 plus quotes memorized, and you just don't use them. So I think having a solid selection of a few quotes is much more important for general English, as opposed to having like spreading yourself thin across multiple. Does that make sense? So if at any time today you have any questions about what I've gone through, do pop them in the chat. I'm going to be coming back and forth between here and the document that we're working on today. You will be sent the document that we're working on today, and more importantly, you'll be sent the recording of this class as well. So do be sure to ask any questions. I'll answer those as we go. And yeah, we'll get into it. Is everybody ready to go? Everyone's got paper, pen, notebook, ability to take notes, because I'm going to share some pretty good tips and tricks today. So I just want to make sure that everybody is ready. Awesome. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now, and we're going to dive straight into things. Now, all the way at the top here. So as we mentioned, the first thing we're going through today is understanding context. So I think within Macbeth, a lot of people overlook the importance of, your introduction and kind of setting the scene from the get-go, because it can really help when it comes down to writing those body paragraphs, fleshing out quotes, and really giving your marker as much context as what they need to understand what you're saying. So we're going to go over some of these context statements, because that's going to help you to understand the themes themselves and ultimately the quotes that link into those themes. So it's all linked today. Now, to begin with, Jacobean Britain. This is a term that I feel like a lot of people don't use within their introduction, and I strongly suggest for you to mention this in your context statement, purely because it shows your marker that you have gone that extra step in understanding the time and place where where Shakespeare's play was set. So just as a little bit of an overview, Jacobean Britain was very religious, Christian. People believed God was all-seeing. Now, this really lays the foundation for the divine right of kings and great chain of being, which we'll go into below. No one was exempt from God's judgment, which is why Shakespeare and Lady Macbeth and Macbeth were so, how do I put it? They were so guilty towards their conscience, towards their actions, because they knew that whilst other people didn't understand or know their actions, that God did. So I think the idea of no one being exempt from his judgment is definitely an important line here. Shakespeare obviously supports the context of Jacobean Britain through the hell that the Macbeths are put through, despite their crimes being unknown to others. So even though all of this happened behind closed doors, both the Macbeths really do go through, mental and physical torment as a result of their unchecked ambition. Another thing to note is that, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. Another thing to note is that the play was set in the Renaissance. So that's where people believed in the innate goodness of humanity. If you're confused with innate, means it's just natural. So people thought that it was normal for people to be good and to show their better side. Now, the Macbeths are destroyed by their own guilt within the play, suggesting that their natural goodness rebelled against their immortality. So what I mean by that is their actions themselves went against what society deemed to be right, okay? And as a result of that, they feel guilty towards their actions. Innocence was another thing I think that's important to understand within the context here. Both Shakespeare and Christianity are really based upon the virtue of innocence. The Macbeths have a facade of innocence. They pretend as though what they're doing isn't actually happening. And as they descend further, they actually want to regain their lost innocence, which manifests itself in guilt and regret. Malcolm, the rightful king of Scotland, is what we call the poster boy of youthful innocence. And he shows how goodness is the correct way to be given power. Once again, this links into the divine right of kings and the great chain of being. You'll hear me mention those two terms quite a lot today, so we're going to unpack those quickly. The great chain of being is where there's a set order for everything in the universe. The social order in particular, where people are indicated as to having the most power or least power. If we zoom in here, we can see gods at the top, angels, king, nobles, gentlemen, peasants, animals. Quite easy to understand the social order of things, but how those play out within the play are quite interesting, okay? So if anybody went against the chain of being, COB, they would be punished. Macbeth disturbs the chain of being by committing regicide. For those who are uncertain, regicide is the term given for killing a king. This sees the breakdown of society and the Macbeth's mental stability, especially when they start to go downhill and Lady Macbeth starts to have a hallucination, same with Macbeth. Divine right of kings. Kings were higher beings chosen by God to rule, and that's obviously interlinked with the chain of beings. So you can see up here we've got God, angels, and king. God was the one who basically elected king as opposed to men themselves. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to come over onto the chat now, make sure that everybody's understanding so far. So I'm sure that your teachers would have mentioned great chain of being and divine right of kings. Does everybody have a solid understanding of those two concepts? Because I think those are probably the two most underpinning themes within our discussion today. So just drop into the chat. Does everybody understand the ideas behind great chain of being and divine right of kings, or is it something that I might need to go over a bit more? Awesome. Good, good. Yeah, because I think this would have been something emphasized within class and stuff like that as well. So yeah, some people view Great Chain of Being as a theme itself, but I more so see it as something that is underpinning themes and that kind of used to support quotes. So I think Great Chain of Being, Divine Right of Kings can definitely be used across multiple different themes, not just as a theme itself, if that makes sense. So we'll go back over now. So before we dive into the themes, I wanted to go over some useful words to describe main characters. Now, here I've got the witches, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. I feel like the witches are definitely an important character, but they aren't who we're going to be focusing on today. We're mainly focusing on Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So when you guys receive this document, do have a little look over. Now, these terms are terms that I give to my students every single year because it really helps for students to understand how they can describe characters. And essentially, I feel like your character description, your character analysis in line with your quote analysis is really what sets students apart when it comes to, your external exam response. So going over these, Macbeth, he's bloodthirsty, he's greedy, he's a murderer, he's submissive. Now, when I say submissive, he's submissive towards Lady Macbeth, power hungry, morally conflicted, tyrannical. All of these words can be used within your character analysis to then support your quotes themselves. So don't overlook the power of explaining and justifying your character's actions properly, because ultimately that's what's going to put your quote analysis as, a level up from the standard quote analysis. Okay. Same thing with Lady Macbeth. We've got opportunistic, coercive, determined, strategist, scheming, strong willed. All of these words can be used within your analysis. Now, before we continue, I want to see your opinions here. What are some other ways in which you guys would describe Macbeth and Lady Macbeth? Drop them into the chat because I want to see your how you guys would describe them. Because I think once again, if we can understand and be confident in the character analysis, that our quote analysis is going to be 10 times better. So what are some ways that you guys might describe Macbeth in particular? Drop them into the chat for me. Morally corrupt, exactly my thoughts. His actions really do reflect that. Gullible, I mean, yes, definitely, but I think that we could definitely find a few more ways to describe that. Wait for some more responses. Manipulative, 100%. He really does twist things in his own favor. And I think more importantly, the idea of manipulation really comes behind the facade side of things. The fact that he has that facade of innocence and continues to work behind closed doors. That's fine, Liz. You'll get access to the recording later, but you will have to fill out that form. So the form that Ollie has linked within that chat, just make sure you fill that out and you'll be able to access our recording. Impulsive, 100% Claire. I definitely agree with that. Definitely impulsive. How about Lady Macbeth? What are our thoughts on Lady Macbeth? Because I think she has a very similar role to Macbeth in terms of their unchecked ambition, but at the same time, controlling. Yeah, first thing that comes to mind. Cunning. Yep, beautiful. What else are we thinking? I mean, personally, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are the only. I think I mentioned Banquo as well. Banquo is the only character. Those three characters are the only characters that I used within my external exam. But I think if you've got a really solid understanding of Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, that's going to pull you through your external regardless. Dominant, 100%. I think she's definitely got that dominant nature within the first half of the play, but towards the end, she's definitely more that submissive side of things. I think that also goes to challenge and then accept the gender stereotypes at the time. So we'll go into that further. Use her femininity for advantage, 100%, 100%. Challenges gender roles. This is what I want to read. Exactly. Because I think, once again, Shakespeare does portray those gender roles within Macbeth, but I think the challenge towards the societal norms is really what's interesting about how the play is, portrayed. What else do we have? Anything else? Nope. Perfect. Oh, in my opinion, he really wanted to kill, and Lady Macbeth just gave him the courage to. I think I agree with that to a certain extent. And I'll explain why. I think Macbeth, because remember when we first were introduced to Macbeth at the beginning of the play, he was a heroic leader. He had many battles, that type of thing. So I definitely agree with his violent nature there. But at the same time, I feel like he was always a bit hesitant to trust Lady Macbeth. Like, ultimately, she's the one who pushed him across the line when it came to murdering King Duncan. Exactly. I think he felt guilt. I think he felt guilty even before he did it. Like, he knew that listening to his conscience and listening to his faith would have been the better path, but he still chose to listen to Lady Macbeth, which I think is more of a testament towards his weaknesses, as opposed to his strength, if anything else. Do you know what I mean? But I get what you're saying. I think the context, especially the fact that he was a warrior, it does lend you to think that he wanted to kill. But I still think that his heroic nature was still, to begin with, loyal to the king and the kingdom. I feel as though it's Lady Macbeth who really pushes him across that line. But even still, we'll unpack that further. I feel like a lot of the quotes and a lot of the things that we unpack today and general English in itself is really open to your understanding. Like, I think if you justify things well enough with quotes, with evidence, with your character analysis, you can basically answer any exam question, and nobody can really judge you for your perception because it's all down to how you perceive a quote. So that's kind of where the way that you describe quotes, the way that you describe characters is so important in supporting your thesis and supporting your body paragraphs. Because if you can do that well enough, you can answer anything. Did the witches have any ulterior motives, or are they just a representation of Macbeth's sinful impulses? I mean, I wouldn't say they had ulterior motives in the sense that they didn't really have anything to gain from Macbeth becoming king. I'd definitely say they're more of a representation of his sinful impulses, if you're going to put it like that. But at the same time, I think that they're also like implying what will happen. Like the superstition behind them really is what's foreshadowing what's going on in the future. I think Shakespeare used them to bring on the plot. Exactly. So the foreshadowing of what happens next is really where the witches come into play. How many body paragraphs and pieces of evidence they want in the essay? Honestly, you can get away with 2. You can get away with 2 body paragraphs. It all depends on how lengthy your analysis is. And if you can not rattle off as in like say empty things, but if you can really flesh out a quote, you could really get away with having 4 or 5 quotes within your external exam. And I say that with experience. Like, I've supported, like I said, hundreds of students with general English, and I'd say a lot of them go into their essay with, say, 8 to 10 quotes memorized, and they'll use maybe 6 or 7 of them. So it really depends how you want to split your body paragraphs. Ideally, you'd want to be looking at 3 body paragraphs. Would you be able to go through the structure on how we should write like paragraphs based on themes? That is all tomorrow's session. So tomorrow we've got full 1.5 hours all about body paragraph structure and essays. Also how to form a proper thesis as well. So Erin, make sure you join our class tomorrow because that's going to be our main focus during tomorrow's session. Okay, awesome. But also with the comment on body paragraphs, I feel as though there's like a split that you can take with that. So you can look at either the characters themselves. You could have body paragraphs just based on characters. So Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Banquo. Or you could look at specific points within the play, as in start, middle, end. That could also be a split in your body paragraphs. Or you could also unpack based on themes themselves. You got characters and then themes. Like even though there's one overarching theme or one overarching question that you're answering, if you can find multiple different aspects that link back into that question, like through themes, you could definitely base your entire essay across different themes. So, your thesis could be something along the lines of, this is shown through regret, guilt, and paranoia. And you could have one paragraph on regret, one paragraph on guilt, one paragraph on paranoia, as opposed to, this is shown through Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Banquo. That would be a split there. So it all depends upon how you want to approach that. But we'll go over that tomorrow, okay? Anyway, back to our content. This is going into key themes. So I've actually done a bit of an infographic here where I'm trying to link the themes towards each other. And I think understanding this link between the themes is probably one of the most important things that you can understand. Now, we will be going through 4 themes today, but within our future classes, we'll definitely go more into depth into each one of these themes. So do keep an eye out for all of those. Now, notice how I've got a bit of a split between these. Realistically, chain of being can also be linked to supernatural. Guilt can be linked to great chain of being. You can definitely make more links than what I've shown here, but these are, I think, our core links between themes. So in particular, power is linking to gender, as in the power that Macbeth holds, the power that Lady Macbeth holds, definitely leads you to believe, the power of masculinity and femininity in unchecked ambition. The great chain of being as well, I think that's going to link in across multiple different domains. But the fact that Lady Macbeth goes against those gender roles means she ultimately works against the great chain of being. Just like how Macbeth commits regicide, that's how he goes against the great chain of being. So you can see the link between those in particular, as in, if you were to get a question on gender, you could bring in both power and great chain of being because they're very, very interlinked themes. Okay. Now, guilt, regret, and paranoia. Guilt is the same thing as regret, realistically. Same thing as guilt and paranoia. I feel like they just switch out the words to kind of give you guys some more options as to what you can talk about. But realistically, when push comes to shove, regret, paranoia, it's all the same as guilt. I feel like guilt's the overriding term here. Now, all 3 of these concepts link down to the supernatural. So you can think about, say, the hallucinations, the blood, the motifs, everything like that, all comes down to the supernatural side of things. So there's definitely a few more links you could be making between these themes, and we'll go over those in future classes. But I think these are the core links that I'd be making between these themes. Now, I wanted to kind of emphasize to you how you could structure an essay and how you could use multiple themes within the one theme. Okay, so for an essay question on power, for example, you could look at personal ambition. It's the same thing as power. Legitimate and illegitimate use of power. You could always go for that split. That's what I mean about 2 body paragraphs, is you could have one paragraph on legitimate power and one body paragraph on illegitimate use of power. It all comes down to, say, using a solid 2-3 quotes per body paragraph to really support your point there. The consequences of choices on individual, society, and nature, you can see how that's where the great chain of being would come in, perhaps even, the gender side of things as well. Consequences of working against the great chain of being and being unaccepting of the divine right of kings. Now, this is like exclusive access that I'm giving you into my brain thoughts right now, but I think there's definitely going to be a bit of an emphasis on great chain of being and divine right of kings this year, purely because there hasn't been a specific exam question about Great Chain of Being for a while. I don't actually think there has been one at all for Great Chain of Being, but it's definitely something that you could flesh out across multiple themes as well as multiple characters. But I definitely take more of a thematic approach here, purely because, gender and power are both really linked to the Great Chain of Being. Same thing with guilt. You could look at, say, all three of those themes within the same essay, but I really think there's going to be a bit of more of an emphasis on Great Chain of Being this year, purely because it hasn't been assessed yet. Another thing that you could look at for power is the duality between masculinity and femininity within the Jacobean era. Once again, you can see the link between power and gender and how that could be supported by going with or against the Great Chain of Being. I'm just going to jump over to the chat now and see what your thoughts are there. How about a question on sleep? I mean, I feel as though there's always one broad question, i.e. divine right of kings or, chain of being. There's also one more nuanced question. So it could be about how sleep affects people throughout the play. But even then, I feel like there wouldn't be a whole lot to base your essay upon, especially given there's only, say, a couple of quotes that come to mind there. Think about like the breadth of the question they could be asking is like, yes, sleep is very important, but I feel as though they might look more at, say, hallucinations or something like that. Fate, I think fate is important, but once again, that comes down to that's more about Great Chain of Being than anything else. So think about those umbrella terms as to what the themes are actually covering. They could definitely ask about fate, but they could also ask about it in the sense of Great Chain of Being. Okay. Light and dark. I feel like that's more of like a literary device than a theme itself. And by that I mean you could definitely use that contrast within your thematic and quote analysis, but whether or not they'd make that as a question itself, I don't think there's a whole lot of breadth within that question. So I think Banquo always comes up. Somehow Banquo is always involved. That is a character that we'll be looking at in a few weeks. Today is going to be mainly about Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, but the witches, Banquo, all of those major but not main characters are going to be unpacked further. How is Macbeth represented as a male character? That was literally my question basically in 2020, is how his unchecked ambition is showcased to his character. So do have a look through the past QCAA papers. This is something that we'll be doing in future weeks as well to predict the external exam question. But between you and I, it's a secret, so don't tell anybody, just kidding. But yeah, I think it's definitely going to have more of a focus on Divine Right of Kings and Great Chain of Being because they haven't assessed that yet. So, what else? What else do we have here? What else? Yeah, so drop down your thoughts of what you guys would think that the exam questions are, and I'm going to give you my my thoughts on this because I feel like this is quite interesting for you and for me to see. Motherhood, yes, but you're just going to be able to talk about Lady Macbeth. Like, think about the breadth. Like, they need to have a character and a thematic split, as in you need to have multiple characters that relate to that theme, as well as multiple scenes and quotes that can relate to that theme as well. So motherhood, yes, they haven't assessed that, but I think they haven't assessed that because it's a very limited scope. Okay. Perception versus reality. There's definitely, you've definitely got legs to stand on there. I think that is definitely a solid question they could ask. That would be more based around, say, hallucinations, sleep, blood, that type of thing. Are the witches supernatural? Yeah, so supernatural, perception versus reality. I feel like they haven't asked that. I haven't assessed that a lot. I've heard of quite a few mock exams that have assessed that as well. So they've definitely got like that's definitely a good exam question. Like, it's definitely got something behind it. Religion, I wouldn't really say that's a theme. I feel as though that is more under, say, Divine Right of Kings, Great Chain of Being than a standalone theme itself. So you could definitely bring religion into your exam response. Fate versus free will. I like that, Bella. I think that could definitely have something. How guilt is portrayed. Yes, but I think they have also assessed guilt in the past as well. once again, guilt is something that could definitely come under your response if it was on Great Chain of Being, Divine Right of Kings. Are the witches really supernatural with Macbeth's visions just an illusion? I feel like that's more of a literature style essay question because there's some contention behind that. I feel as though within general English, you're never going to fence it. You're always going to go one side or the other. And I feel as though that's something that people would more sit on the fence with as opposed to actually go with one side or the other. So I feel like it's a good, solid question. But whether or not, I don't think that's something that QCAA would ask for general English in particular. It's just the phrasing of that and the idea of not having a definitive answer that I think QCAA wouldn't exactly go for. Treason, that once again comes under Great Chain of Being. So I'm hoping you guys can see the theme here with Great Chain of Being and Divine Right of Kings being probably one of the most important things to understand within your essay. And also 800 to 1,000 words. Yes, that is your response. In terms of your split for body paragraphs, depends how many body paragraphs you're doing, but I'd say 200-300 words per body paragraph and 100 words for your intro and conclusion. You'll be on point. Intro is definitely something that you can memorize before your exam. Same with conclusion. It's just the context statements that might have to change as well as your thesis. Should we write context? 110%. I think there's something that I encourage my students to do all the time is you can't just drop a quote in there. It just doesn't work in terms of the flow of your essay. You need to have some type of context as to where and when and why that quote or that scene is taking place. So when we're talking about quotes today, we're going to talk about just the quotes themselves. But in future weeks, we'll definitely look at the context that surrounds those quotes, so you guys can lead those quotes in a little bit better towards your analysis. But when it comes down to how I'd structure those body paragraphs, once again, something we'll go through tomorrow in depth. But I definitely have a context statement unpacking the theme itself. I know that there's a few different ways to write body paragraphs. Personally, I work with Teal. There's definitely like the different acronyms that I've heard. Can we just for tomorrow's session, can we drop into the chat who's a Teal writer and who's something else? Not that there's anything wrong with something else, but I just want to see who's writing under Teal, who's writing under other things. Yeah, pedal. I've heard of pedal a lot. Sometimes I do pedal. Pretzel. What's pretzel? Can somebody explain? Pretzel sounds interesting. I like that. Do they want a background paragraph? No, I think that's more going to come towards your introduction. So we'll structure that out tomorrow, but you'll definitely have a background statement, a context statement, so to say. So that's why we went over the context just before. But a background paragraph, so to say, I wouldn't necessarily have. So P, I like P. Point, evidence, explain. What about your link? I feel like that's more like Peel, if anything. You definitely need a link. They always taught me since year 8, point, elaborate, contextualize, evidence, discussion. Yeah. So see who asked the background. So Mariam, see how military's got that contextualize bit right before their evidence? That's exactly how I would write in terms of my body paragraph structure. So I think that's quite important. Point, reference, evidence, technique, analyze, link. Where does the Z come from? I'm still confused. I like pretzel, but I need to know where the Z comes from. Technique. Oh no, I actually don't know. Yeah, tell me more. But yeah, if there's any other like exam questions that you want me to comment on as we're going through today, let me zoom in technique. Oh, I like that. This is nice. I really like pretzel now. I think I might be a pretzel converted from Teal. Teal so even though we passed the theme talks, we've never passed the theme talks. Drop them in whenever. This is what I'm here for. What are your thoughts on morality? It was on my mocks. Well, I mean, realistically, the whole I feel like what really undermines morality is the idea of power. Like a legitimate and illegitimate power is like what is moral or what is not moral within the essay. So I think, whilst I also think that you could go for a split here where like there are some characters who remain morally conscious, and there are obviously Macbeth and Lady Macbeth who go against that. Once again, I definitely link that back to the Great Chain of Being, where the characters who don't uphold morality are ultimately, they suffer a downfall because of that. How many strong vocab words do you suggest? As many as you need, honestly. I would, when you say strong vocab, do you mean the character analysis words? Because I feel like whenever you introduce or explain a character is probably when you'd have one of those. So it all depends on how you're going to structure your essay itself. But definitely do use those quite frequently because it definitely adds breadth into your response as opposed to just saying, Macbeth is this. You actually have some context behind it. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, what do you mean by just unpack what you mean by strong vocab words so I know that I'm explaining that the right way. Whilst you guys drop a few more questions, hang on. What about a question about the influence of the witches' prophecies on characters? Yeah, it's definitely got some legs. But I don't know. I just feel like the witches are minor. They're still important, but they're more of a minor character than say Macbeth, Lady Macbeth. I feel like your main question is definitely going to be something you can include Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, Banquo in. Your minor question is going to be something more along the lines of like a nuanced response, which definitely could be witches. But do you guys understand what I mean by like the major question, like the one where everything's related, and then the more specific question? You might have noticed a bit of a theme within your mock exams, because there's always going to be like a main question, like one that's like a little bit like wider in scope, as opposed to the second question, which is usually a bit narrower, but still has a fair bit of content to unpack beneath it. Does that make sense between the broader one and the narrower one? If it's about character, can we link it to a theme? 110%. If it's about a character, you could link it to multiple themes, and that could literally be the structure of your essay. You could say, Lady Macbeth is influenced by power, guilt, and gender. That could be your thing. One question is always broader than another. Exactly. Yeah, one question is always broader. Personally, I go with the broader question always, because I think that the narrow questions, QCAA comes up with some cooked questions sometimes. So do be aware of that. Now, in the interest of time, we're going to keep on going through our key themes. Now, first theme that we're going through today is power. The bolded ones up here, so power, gender, guilt, and supernatural, are what we're going to be covering today. So, and once again, the regret, paranoia, great chain of being, morality, all of those other themes that you guys drop within the chat will be discussed within the next few weeks. So do keep an eye out for that. So within power, there's a few different concepts that could be related. So firstly, the concept of legitimate and illegitimate power. I think this is where the morality would kind of sit. Macbeth murders the king, legitimate ruler, and continues to ruthlessly murder to maintain his illegitimate hold on power. That's pretty self-explanatory. So I think you could definitely have a few different quotes that support like his unchecked ambition under that. Now, you'll notice as I go through the thematic overview, I'm gonna mention the word unchecked ambition quite a lot. Now, in my eyes, unchecked ambition is probably one of the best ways that you could explain somebody's actions, because the unchecked ambition is their actions, but at the same time, you're bringing in a thematic focus towards your analysis. Okay, so using the term unchecked ambition can be super, super powerful in terms of your quotes and themes. Okay, now moving on from legitimate and illegitimate power, we'll go into this more in depth, but the concept of personal ambition as well. Macbeth's kingship is compromised due to his own vaulting ambition. You guys will be familiar with that quote, I'm sure, but notice how I've actually embedded that quote within a sentence there. That is one of the most successful ways of getting as many quotes within your response as possible. If you can embed quotes within your sentences, your essay is going to look 10 times better as opposed to somebody who doesn't. So do be mindful of like just little sprinkle quotes. I've heard some teachers call them sprinkle quotes to put throughout your sentences, as well as those main quotes you're actually going to understand and analyze within your paragraphs. So that is a sprinkle quote. But yeah, he has a whole lot of unchecked power, and ultimately that's what leads him to his downfall. So this goes back to something that we were discussing just before. I feel like Macbeth understands the nature of his actions. He knows that they're bad, but he still proceeds to do it anyway. And that's kind of where his personal ambition is really prevalent, because he disregards his moral conscience in favor of his personal ambition. Okay? Once again, those actions represent the power of personal ambition on morals and loyalty. As in, before he had the thought of committing regicide, I'm 99% sure that Macbeth was a moral and loyal person. It's as soon as his personal ambition started to ramp up that he began to disregard those beliefs. Okay? There's also the concept of power corrupted through outside forces. Now, this is definitely something that you could bring the witches into, particularly since they're always foreshadowing the future. But ultimately, what I mean by this is he suffers psychological burdens, both of them, as a result of their quest for power, ultimately resulting in their downfall. Now, the psychological burdens can be seen as outside forces, but you could also see the witches as outside forces, as well as other characters or other situations like hallucinations, the supernatural, that type of thing. So outside forces contributing towards that unchecked power is definitely something that I would focus on if it was the case. Now, I think the whole gist behind power being a theme is the fact that people best serve their state by being humble and generous as opposed to ambitious and competitive. So I think having like a little, what I would call a sappy statement, something like this, to kind of prove your theme or prove your point, looking at more of a positive note of things, because Macbeth is pretty dark, let's be honest. But if you look at something, if you end your sentences or end your analysis with something a little bit more positive, it's a bit of a psychological trick for your marker, in the sense that they're going to feel a little bit happier about what you've just written because you've ended on something good. This is something that I use within English all the time, especially when I'm unpacking things that are dark in nature, like Macbeth. If you can have just one sentence on the good side of things, you're going to end up with a better mark than somebody who just focuses on the bad. And that all comes down to, I don't know, basically tricking your marker into thinking that you're, like into a good frame of mind as opposed to a bad frame of mind. Does that make sense? So, oh, I didn't mean to stop broadcasting there. Anyway, we're going to come across onto the chat. What are your thoughts there on? Hang on, I'm just going to share my screen again. What are your thoughts on power, guys? Is everybody understanding my take on the power side of things? I'm just going to wait for some of these responses to come in the chat. But yeah, I think power is probably one of the most important topics and themes that we unpack, as well as Great Chain of Being. But you can see there's quite a few different links beneath that we can make. Now, moving on throughout our themes, gender. Gender is probably the second most important side of things. Now, Shakespeare obviously explores different versions of masculinity and femininity, which really goes to reveal assumptions about gender and attitudes towards men and women at the time, especially given that we're looking at the Jacobean era. I think that the idea within gender is definitely something that's going to correlate across a fair few different themes. So Lady Macbeth is initially portrayed as the dominant and powerful figure, the planner, the schemer, the driving force. We unpack that within the chat. Her unsex me here speech or soliloquy demonstrates her desire to challenge the accepted role of women within Jacobean era. interlinking with chain of being, she goes against the chain of being. And as a result of that, by the end of the play, she's troubled, delusional, and ultimately suicidal. Okay? Shakespeare uses Lady Macbeth to challenge and then confirm the accepted versions of femininity at the time, as in she was more masculine towards the start of the play and more feminine at the end, particularly as she starts to unravel as a result of her consequences. She definitely takes on a more feminine approach towards her character, as opposed to when she was pushing Macbeth towards being more ambitious and more outgoing. Okay? Same type of thing with Macbeth. He firstly undermines and then upholds the typical representations of men through his ambitious and violent nature, as in to begin with, he wasn't that violent, he wasn't that ambitious. Lady Macbeth comes in, makes him more ambitious, makes him more violent with her masculine energy. And as a result of that, Macbeth is then converted from somebody with more feminine traits to somebody with more masculine traits. Okay? I'm hoping that, once again, this is like all of these themes. This is just an overview of these themes today. So these are themes that we'll cover more in depth within our future masterclasses. But I'm hoping that this is making sense so far. I'm going to come back and see our thing. Power is tempting. Yes, 110%. I think the idea of what people could have with power is, even in real life, you see that. It's not just in Macbeth. That's another thing as well, is you can really relate a lot of these concepts and themes back into our current day society. I don't know, I think power is such a broad theme. How do you approach a specific scope of it? So that's kind of where we went over just before. You'll see this within our notes that we sent to you today. But the idea of, say, legitimate and illegitimate power, or gender roles even with power, can definitely narrow down that theme a little bit more. Particularly if you take like the stance of, one paragraph for illegitimate power, one paragraph for legitimate power, you can definitely narrow it down a little bit more. But yeah, power is definitely a broad theme. I agree with you there. It's just, I think it's got a lot. That's probably the broadest, most umbrella theme that we look at today. Would you have to write about the relevance of themes decided today? No, you wouldn't have to write about the relevance, but notice how, like, as with before, how I mentioned always having like that one sentence about like the better side of things or the broader picture. That could definitely be a sentence that you incorporate within each paragraph, looking at how this is still relevant within today's society and it teaches us X, Y, Z, or teaches audiences X, Y, Z. Do you get what I'm saying? So you could definitely use that idea to then convey a broader message. I think that would work really well, actually. So you wouldn't necessarily have to look within the scope of the play. You could also look at how the scope of the play influences current day as well. I think that would be really powerful. Does this make sense so far? Also, did that make sense about my power explanation? You're right. It's a very broad theme, but I think if you can narrow it down to say how that is shown through masculinity, femininity, legitimate power, even with the great chain of being and the consequences of going against that, that can definitely narrow down your scope a fair bit more. Does that make sense? I am hoping so. Perfect. Now, going back over here, next theme we're looking at is guilt. Okay, so we've got two more themes to unpack, and then we're going on to quotes. So I think the main thing that guilt is associated with is religion itself and the great chain of being. So Macbeth knows by committing regicide, killing the king, that he's going to sacrifice his life in heaven and be abandoned by God. Macbeth does reconsider his plan. He wasn't 110% for killing the king from the get-go. It took Lady Macbeth's encouragement to actually push him towards that plan. But even then, the fact that he reconsiders his plan shows the power religion and belief had over people at the time, so within that Jacobean era. Shakespeare suggests Macbeth should have listened to his conscience and faith rather than Lady Macbeth. I 110% agree with this. If he had listened to his conscience, which, had a much better way of viewing things rather than Lady Macbeth, he wouldn't have had such a severe moral downfall. Okay. Guilt within the play is presented as an intense fear of knowing yourself and facing what you've done. As in, Macbeth really runs away from facing what he's done, as well as the fact that he has become a different person to what he used to be. Okay, so I think that's another relevant part here, is understanding that what guilt is actually presented as. His perception as an honourable hero dies along with King Duncan. Macbeth would rather forget who he is than look at what he's done. I think this is such a powerful line here. Macbeth would rather forget who he is than look at what he's done. Okay, so I think this is so relevant in like seeing his character progression. He used to be an honourable hero. He used to be somebody that people looked up to, and so the idea of him forgetting who he is and not actually facing the reality of his actions is prevalent throughout the entire play. Okay, now the cost of Lady Macbeth's guilt is shown as endless paranoia. She is always worried about something. The cost of being guilty is essentially mental exhaustion and that peace of mind. Okay, the Macbeths are aware of their infinite cycle of violence to satisfy their paranoia. They are aware of that 110%. It's more the fact that they ignore that and forget it to not face the reality of their actions. Okay. Also, sins and crimes are never rewarded, ever. Especially this links back into the great chain of being. And this ultimately leaves perpetrators with their regret and remorse, as we can see through Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. That guilt and regret can't be escaped. You can't change the fate and must live with the consequences of your actions. Once again, this is something that can definitely be conveyed within today's current society and how you might link that back to its relevance. Okay. And lastly, I think this is something that a lot of people overlook. Like, Macbeth is a king, sure. I mean, he made himself king, but he's also a king of Scotland. Okay. His guilty conscience ultimately manifests within the state of Scotland. Both end up being weaker and more uncertain as a result of the actions that have been taken. So that's another thing I think that you can look at as well. Is not just Macbeth, it's not just Lady Macbeth, it's the environment around them that slowly starts to crumble as a result of their actions. Okay. How are we making sense of this? I think that guilt side of things, guilt is definitely linked into regret, paranoia, that type of thing. But once again, I'm looking at the broader themes here to give you guys an understanding of what could come in within those more narrow approaches. What are your thoughts so far? Guilt, gender, power. Is everybody liking things so far? And also, is there anything additional that you'd like me to go over? If there's enough of a consensus on like a certain theme or topic, I'll definitely touch base on it today. But yeah, drop in your thoughts because I would like to see where we are at. Also, don't forget your water when you're studying. Very important for brain power. Can we go over divine right of kings and an example question they'd ask? We can definitely do that. Thanks for asking. Yeah, we'll make that a priority. So wait, would these themes be included in the questions? 110%. These are broad themes you could approach any question with. And if you have a core understanding of these 4 themes, you'll be able to understand any question they throw at you in QCAA. And I say that out of experience. Like, I've supported kids going from, 13 out of 25 in their internal assessments to 23, 24 out of 25 in their external Macbeth exam, all from understanding these 4 key themes. If you have a solid understanding of these themes, there's nothing stopping you from acing your external exam. Okay, so yeah, these themes are definitely going to be included within the questions that QCAA asks. But another thing as well is in our future masterclasses, we'll actually be personally unpacking these quotes and these themes for you based upon exam questions. So you guys can really see how each quote, how each theme links back into those exam questions. Okay, so it'll all make sense. I think it's all linked as well. So those 4 themes are definitely things that I'd be comfortable and comfortable and confident in leading into your external exams, because they will carry you through 110%. Once again, like, it's been 4 years of me doing general English now, well, 6 if you include year 11 and 12. But I've rinsed and repeated this process time and time again with hundreds of different students. And I know for a fact that these 4 themes are probably the most important things you can understand when it comes to themes. Okay. So moving on, our last one, supernatural. So there's 2 different aspects of supernatural within Macbeth. There's blood and also ghosts and hallucinations. Okay. I say ghosts and hallucinations because, ghosts are hallucinations, but they're slightly different from each other. So they're separate. Going through blood first, though. So blood is used as a symbol of guilt and death. And essentially what that means is that the Macbeths can't escape the consequences of their actions. Notice how supernatural could definitely be linked to guilt and regret, in the sense that neither of them can be escaped. Okay. So that link is present there. Lady Macbeth believes that washing their hands will rid them of both the physical blood, but also their mental guilt. And that's not necessarily the case, because guilt goes beyond the literal blood on their hands, with nothing able to remove the metaphorical blood on their souls. Okay, so it's more than just surface level here. There's definitely a deeper meaning behind the whole blood motif. Okay, now ghosts and hallucinations as well, another motif. That's very similar in the sense that it symbolizes guilt and death. But I think another thing to notice is that ghosts suggest the existence of an afterlife and further consolidate the consequences of Macbeth's actions. So the fact that he knows that there is a consequence to what he's done, as in he's not going to make it back, he's not going to make it to the afterlife, he's not going to be, he is going to be abandoned by God, that really manifests itself through the presence of ghosts. Okay. Now, Macbeth struggles to tell the difference between what is real and what is imagined. Now, that really goes to suggest that guilt has already taken hold. All right. His inability to cope with guilt is what makes him hallucinate. The fact that he doesn't want to face the reality of the things that he's done means the hallucinations are going to come shortly after that. Shakespeare presents guilt as an intense psychological torture, interlinking with the chain of being. So because Macbeth went against the chain of being, that's ultimately what means he suffers from those psychological torments, okay? Lady Macbeth is also tormented by visions when trying to wash her hands of an invisible spot of blood. Now, I think whilst a lot of you are going to use that out them spot quote within your essay, regardless of what approach you take, I think it's important to note this one aspect. It reflects how guilt doesn't need to be visible or known to others for it to be real. So that blood stain, I think it's in Act 5 or something like that she repeats this, that's not real. There's not actually a spot of blood in her hands. But the fact that it is an imagined spot of blood goes to show that guilt doesn't need to be visible or known to others. Okay? Does this make sense so far? Let me just have a look on the chat. My mic is cutting off. Where? Oh, that's not good. I am sorry about that. I'm hoping that within the recording, that's fine. Do go back over the recording and make sure that that is not the case. Do you guys remember where I cut off? The mic's fine now. Okay, cool. If anybody can tell me where I cut off, then I'll happily go back over that, because I want you guys to know what I'm saying. How is supernatural linked to blood? I'm not getting it. Supernatural is like something surreal, which the blood brings. I think that's the gist of it. Yeah. Isn't the start of the supernatural side. Okay, I'll go back over the supernatural link to blood then? Shouldn't that be guilt instead? Notice how guilt and supernatural are quite linked. So that's kind of what I tried to unpack within the start there. Supernatural and guilt are very, very similar in the sense that the supernatural essentially manifests itself or presents itself as a consequence of the guilt, or as a link to the guilt somebody's facing. Okay. I'm going to go back over this blood as a motif thing just because I think that's where my mic might have cut out. So within blood, like we were just mentioning, that's essentially the physical representation of the mental guilt that somebody is facing. Okay. So think about it as though there wouldn't be blood if there wasn't, if bad deeds weren't done to begin with. So blood wouldn't be a thing. The hallucination of blood wouldn't be a thing if there wasn't something to be guilty about to begin with. Okay, so blood is definitely a representation of guilt and also a representation of the supernatural side of things as well. Okay. Macbeths can't escape the consequences of their actions, but also that is presented through the whole hand washing scenes. They think that they're going to rid themselves of the physical blood, but that doesn't actually happen. It's within their mental state, okay? And then once again, you guys can see this within the notes, but nothing is going to be able to remove the metaphorical blood on their souls. This also comes down to the fate side of things as well. Once the actions have been done, there's no going back. There's consequences to that, okay? I'm hoping that goes back on. I'm hoping that fixes up any issues that we had with that. Just checking the chat now. Wait, so what was your thought on the question about witches or supernatural? I feel as though that could be a question to an extent. I just feel like it's so the witches, you can definitely bring those in. Supernatural, you could definitely be those, like bring that in and make an argument out of that. But I feel like that's going to be more of your like limited scope question as opposed to your broader scope question. So just because, say, with the supernatural, there's only a few characters that actually experience supernatural happenings, so to say, as opposed to the witches. The witches are one character in themselves. So, and also they're like a more minor character than some of the other characters. So I think that there could definitely be a question on either of those things, 110%. I'm 90% sure that witches have already been assessed in the past, so it probably isn't going to be this year that they're going to assess it again. But yeah, I think that's going to be more of a limited scope question. If it is a question, it's going to be that second question. But yeah, I think Great Chain of Being, that type of thing, is definitely going to be more of a main focus this year. Okay. Does that make sense, Claire? Which is supernatural. I think that, you know, you've definitely got legs to stand on there, but it's not going to be a primary question. Definitely something that I'd you know, prepare for. Yeah, and that's the thing. I heard of a lot of mocks looking at supernatural as a mock, like as an exam question. That's what I mean. It's definitely got something there, and you can definitely base an entire essay around it. That's so fine. But when it comes to external exams, there's going to be a broader question with a little bit more power behind it, in my opinion. Okay. Also, whilst we're on the topic here, can you guys drop into the chat what your mock exam questions were? Because they've kind of been littered throughout the chat, but I just want to have them all in one place. I just want to have a little look, see what you guys were assessed on. Okay. What else? Supernatural, obviously, we unpacked that. Supernatural kingship, yeah. Inner conflict, comparing other male characters to Macbeth being a coward. Jelly, that was literally my question in 2020, Macbeth being a coward. How do the witches' prophecies influence the characters? So you guys did have a witches' prophecies. Supernatural. I see a lot of supernatural here. So Claire, I think that goes to prove your point. Definitely can be an exam question. How is blood represented and analyzed significance of, yeah, so once again, supernatural. Analyze the significance of the change in Macbeth and Banquo's relationship. That's been a past QCAA paper. Malcolm describes Lady Macbeth as evil. To what extent is his character analysis? Do you agree? Something along those lines. I've seen that question before, Erin. That's a pretty good one. I like that. But think QCAA is assessed it as well. So I don't think that's going to be an exam, like an external exam question. To what extent did the supernatural motivate Macbeth's actions? Heaps of supernatural here, guys. I'm actually really, really pleased to see this. Awesome. How was Malcolm represented? Malcolm, seriously? Did they actually have an exam question all about the king? He died. He died in the first two themes, like the first two acts. That's rough. I'm so sorry I had to write to that. Even then, that's an interesting exam question. Probably the most interesting I've read so far today. That's the exam question. Maybe it was Banquo. QCAA made our mock, so I doubt these would be. Did QCAA make your mock? That's interesting. A lot of schools purchase mocks from third-party exam writers, so that's fine. But yeah, even still, Supernatural definitely has some legs to stand on, but I know for a fact that it's been assessed by QCAA in the past. So whether or not, even still, I feel like it's a very relevant theme. The idea of hallucinations, the idea of blood, the idea of, the supernatural themselves can definitely be brought into a lot of different exam responses, especially when it comes down to, say, the witches' prophecies, that type of thing. Okay. It's good to see all of your questions here. Yeah, super interesting. A lot on the witches, a lot on supernatural. These are something that we'll unpack within the future, but for now, that's all we've got within supernatural. Okay. Once again, something that we'll go over in future weeks, but this is just a bit of an overview for you guys today. Okay. Now, probably the most important part of our session today is unpacking quotes and literary devices. Okay. So here we've got 8 quotes to go through today. I'm hoping that we will go through most of them, and then also that Divine Right of Kings perspective as well. Okay, so how I've structured these is by looking at the themes that they link to, main themes they link to. Notice how I say main themes, because there's probably more themes they can link to if you would have bend your analysis in a certain way. So stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. This one happens Macbeth, Act 1, Scene 4. Now, you don't have to put the character within your quote analysis, or sorry, quote reference, but do take note of where they're coming from. Act 1, Scene 4, just write that next to your quote within your exam, you'll be fine. Now, I've unpacked the literary devices as well as a bit of analysis on the quote themselves in line with those themes, okay? So once again, same thing with themes. I feel like the literary devices that these are applicable to can change depending on your understanding of the quote. And you don't have to mention every single literary device that it's linked to, just the ones that really resonate and stick out to you, okay? So I've tried to do a bit of a, like, say 2 to 3 literary devices per quote, but you don't necessarily have to make that the case within your external exam. It's just to give you guys an understanding from all aspects as to what you might want to talk about, what's easier for you guys to understand, okay? So within personification, so Macbeth describes the stars with human-like qualities, reflecting his desire to conceal his dark ambitions. This emphasizes internal conflict between his outward appearance and hidden intentions. Okay. Now, we've also got imagery here as well. The contrast between light and dark. Light symbolizes goodness, truth, and purity. Dark symbolizes evil, deceit, and hidden intentions. Alrighty. Macbeth wishes to keep his violent ambitions hidden from the forces of moral judgment. The idea of black and deep desires reflects Macbeth's growing ambition to seize the crown. The quote highlights the recognition of his guilty conscience by needing to conceal it from others. Is this making sense so far? So far, are we good? If you guys want me to go more into depth within each quote, do let me know, because I have not gone over those standard quotes. Okay, you're good, awesome. But I've also gone over like ones that are more broad in understanding as well. Okay, perf. Now, moving on. So that's stars, hide your fires. things without or remedy should be without regard. What's done is done. I feel like this, what's done is done, is definitely a sprinkle quote that you could use just because it is so short and sweet. But you could also use the full quote itself, and that's fine. This also links to ambition and guilt. Now, the literary devices that I see within this, once again, you could see them differently: irony and repetition. So irony, because the deed or the killing of people is far from done in their minds. The murder of King Duncan is only the beginning of a series of events which spiral out of control. The statement contrasts with their ongoing mental torment, as in, if it was done, they wouldn't be continuing to feel the psychological distress of their actions. Okay. Now, the whole what's done is done is repeated later in the scene when Lady Macbeth tries to control the situation. So whether or not you take the quote from Macbeth or Lady Macbeth, that's 110% fine, unless, of course, it's a character-based question and you've got to choose one or the other. But they do both say this. The quote suggests the Macbeths are trying to suppress the weight of their guilt by treating the murder as a past event that no longer holds power over them. Now, that's not necessarily the case, because they are continually haunted by the consequences of their actions. Okay. And as it's repeated more and more, the clearer it becomes that their guilt is still unresolved. Okay. Now, this showcases the destructive power of unchecked ambition. Notice how I used the word unchecked ambition here, because I'm talking about the power of ambition. But essentially what I mean by this is the destructive power of their actions. Okay, so unchecked ambition can kind of be used interchangeably with the word actions. Now, you can see that they try to rationalize the murder as a necessary step in actually gaining the throne. So I think that in itself shows how motivated they are to secure that throne, but more importantly, the lengths and the extent that they're willing to go, whether that be moral or not, to secure that power. Okay, so that's what I mean by unchecked ambition. I think the idea as well, the whole what's done is done has like there's no going back connotation to it. Okay, it highlights the inescapable nature of guilt in itself. So once again, this kind of leads back down to fate, because once you've actually committed to those actions, once you've actually the consequences of them are inescapable. Okay, does this make sense so far? I'm hoping so. Now, moving on. So these ones are about gender and power of ambition. Okay. So, yeah, do I fear the? I can't even do these quotes sometimes. Actually, the milk of human kindness quote. Okay, the catch the nearest wave. If you guys want to take bits and pieces of this quote, then that is so fine. But you don't necessarily have to take the entire quote, because honestly, it's a mouthful, and you probably aren't going to remember the whole quote. But if I was to take a bit of this quote, I would take "too full of the milk of human kindness." That's the only bit that I would take. We'll talk about how to condense quotes in a way that you're actually going to remember in our future sessions as well. So the metaphor here, milk of human kindness, contrasts the nurturing connotations of milk with Macbeth's supposed lack of ruthlessness. Now, milk's traditionally associated with femininity and gentleness. Those are qualities which Lady Macbeth sees as weaknesses in Macbeth's character. So I'm hoping that duality makes sense to you guys, because I feel like it's weird to look at, like, yes, I feel like the analysis is correct here in saying that it contrasts the nurturing connotations of milk, but it's weird to kind of look at milk like that. So I hope that makes sense how I've worded that there. Reflects Lady Macbeth's frustration with gender roles. She challenges these by taking a more masculine position in their relationship. It also showcases Lady Macbeth's ambition without moral boundaries. The quote suggests that she's consumed by her ambition to secure the throne, and that any obstacles towards this must be overcome. This underscores the corrupt nature of unchecked desire for power. Now, before I move on, I just want to make sure that milk analysis made sense, because it's a bit of a weird quote to unpack. do drop into the chat if that didn't make sense, or if it did even, just let me know. Because I think that in itself is a metaphor, the contrast between, milk is a nurturing thing, and then Macbeth's lack of masculinity can sometimes be a little bit difficult for people to understand. So do let me know if you need a little bit. Cool, easy. That's what I want to hear. Awesome. Moving on here. I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none. Once again, you don't need the characters within your quotes. It's just so you guys know who's talking about it for your own sake. But you do need to remember the acts and the scenes. So whenever you're, remembering these quotes, don't forget about the actual analysis of the scenes and stuff as well. Now, once again, gender, power of ambition. This literary device, antithesis, is probably something that you haven't gone through in class. If you have, let me know. But it's essentially the contrast between two very different things. And by contrasting two very different things, you essentially highlight the tension and the significance between them. That's kind of the point of antithesis. So I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none. This contrasts between what's expected of a man versus what exceeds those boundaries and becomes immoral. Once again, in line with what antithesis aims to do, this highlights the tension between behaving within societal norms of masculinity and crossing moral boundaries. So antithesis is the term given towards a contrast between two things, okay? Has anybody heard of antithesis? Is this something that you guys have mentioned in class or anything like that? Because I feel like there's quite a number of times where antithesis could be used as a literary device. And if you guys understand that, no, I've never heard of that. Exactly. So I think, yeah, Jasper Jones has a little bit about it. Veronica wrote about it. That's good to hear. So yeah, antithesis is essentially the contrast between two opposing ideas. Okay. So in this case, it's what a man should do and the moral boundaries of what so it's a contrast between societal norms and moral boundaries, essentially, to put it bluntly. That's what this quote is about. But antithesis itself is looking at two contrasting ideas to highlight the significance of them. And I think that's really important within Macbeth, because he doesn't just contrast two things for fun. He contrasts those two things to actually pull out the significance of them. Is it like a foil? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by foil? Like in character foils? Yeah, to an extent. So I feel like yes and no. I feel like the whole idea of character foils is exactly that, within a character itself. The whole idea of antithesis is within actual concepts and themes themselves, if that makes sense. So it's slightly different, but a similar type of idea where you're looking at the significance of that comparison. Does that make sense? I'm hoping so. Awesome. Perfect. Now, going over, we've got 4 more quotes. Yeah, 4 more quotes to unpack. And then I'm actually going to go over a few of the quotes that you guys want me to unpack. So whilst I'm going through these, do think of some quotes that you think you'd like for me to go through, because I will indeed go through them with the last bit of time that we've got. Now, these 2 quotes are looking at guilt, regret, and paranoia. Notice how they're all linked. The reason why is because guilt is the same as regret. Regret is what creates paranoia. Paranoia creates guilt, X, Y, Z. They're very, very linked, these 3 themes. So I just put them all into the one thing. Oh, full of scorpions is my mind. Here we have a metaphor. Macbeth's mind is compared to scorpions, which conveys the ongoing torment psychologically that he experiences as a result of his actions. The scorpions actually symbolize his guilt, capturing the internal suffering caused by his unchecked ambition. Once again, unchecked ambition is an exchangeable word for actions, okay? Another thing I see here is imagery. Whenever you read a line of Macbeth and it makes you picture something, that's going to be imagery. Nobody can really tell you otherwise, because if you pictured it, it's probably for a good reason. So imagery is another literary device that I feel like you can fall back on if you don't know what's going on. So don't forget the importance of imagery, okay? The image of scorpions evokes fear and discomfort within audiences. giving a sense of the chaos and pain within Macbeth's mind. That conveys how deeply his guilt has penetrated his thoughts and the relentless psychological torture that he faces. Now, I think this is important, the symbolic nature of it as well. You could definitely say this is symbolism. So you've got metaphor imagery, but you could also describe it as symbolism as well, purely because the scorpions aren't actually real, but they are a symbol of his guilt and paranoia towards those actions. Okay. Another one we've got here is sleep no more, the innocent sleep. So in terms of a sprinkle quote, you could definitely use the innocent sleep or Macbeth does murder sleep. Those are probably the most important parts there. So once again, real guilt, regret, and paranoia. I'd class this as a personification and symbolism, but you can look at it different ways. Personification, sleep's actually portrayed as something like a living entity, which could be murdered here. Now, sleep can't be murdered, which is what makes it like personification. I feel like a lot of people overlook that though. So the fact that Macbeth does murder sleep, that whole line, it is telling you that it's a sense of personification because it's got person-like qualities. Okay. Symbolism, of course, sleep is linked to peace, rest, and innocence, all of which Macbeth has lost or as a result of killing King Duncan. Now, the use of both personification and symbolism highlights the deep-seated guilt and psychological impact of his actions. Notice how my analysis within these quotes uses very similar words, and that is so fine. If you can be confident with the ways in which you're describing quotes, you can just change those up within the exams. So it's unlikely that I'd use, say, all four of these quotes that I've gone through so far within the same essay response. But the fact that I'm describing them and becoming comfortable with that language within each quote means that I'll be able to easily replicate that within the exam and, more importantly, change my vocab if I need to within each theme, so based on the question. Okay, so don't be afraid to use a similar style of analysis within your quote, within unpacking your quotes, because I think that can definitely go a long, long way in actually making you feel comfortable in your analysis to begin with. Okay, so last two, we're looking at out them spot. So I think this is probably one of the most famous quotes within Macbeth, arguably, of course, but it's definitely one that people use a lot, which is why I wanted to go over it today. This one links to guilt, regret, and supernatural, but supernatural specifically to blood, okay? I'd class this as symbolism and repetition. It symbolizes the blood of King Duncan and Lady Macbeth's guilt towards her actions. The blood actually becomes a metaphor for her guilt. So you could also talk about this as a metaphor, but I wouldn't make that your primary literary device if you're going to mention it like that, because out damn spot, the quote itself isn't actually a metaphor. It's more the connotation behind it that's the metaphor. Okay, so I'd still call it symbolism as the main literary device. Once again, tormented by the consequences of her unchecked ambition, it is so fine to describe quotes the same way. Okay, so I say that in the sense like it helps you become confident in the ways that you're describing quotes, so you can change that up within your exam. You don't want to be saying the same, you don't want to be describing quotes the same way in your external exam, but you do want to be confident in the ways that you're using the language, which I think is where your similar analysis comes in. Okay, repetition mirrors her frantic state of mind. She tries to cleanse herself of guilt. She can't remove the imagined bloodstain, which reflects her inability to rid herself of the emotional and psychological burden of her crimes. Similar language, similar words, similar structure. Okay. Now, just before we go over this last quote, I want to jump into the chat and make sure there's nothing there. That's fine. Easy. So, last quote today. Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Can't let me clutch thee. Now, I've personally never used this whole quote. I've only ever used that first part. Is this a dagger which I see before me? So this links between supernatural and hallucinations. Okay. There is symbolism and imagery here. I say imagery because it makes you picture something. Okay. Now, the symbol of Macbeth's murderous ambitions and becoming, sorry, it's a symbol of Macbeth's murderous ambition and the beginning of his descent into moral corruption. The hallucination reflects the conflict between Macbeth's inner desires and his conscience, pulling Macbeth deeper into a cycle of violence and guilt. The imagery here comes in from the fact that it's almost beckoning him towards his fate. Okay, so I think that's also important to note as well. The use of imagery creates a sense of inevitability. Even like it's almost as though the murder is not merely a choice, but something that Macbeth is being drawn into by unseen forces. Okay, so I think that's also relevant to note as well. Is there's obviously the supernatural side of things, but this is kind of where the unchecked power as a result of external influence comes in, is where you could mention something like this. Okay, now those are all of the quotes that I wanted to go through with you guys today, and I would like to unpack some further quotes that you guys think you'd need some support with, whether that be with literary devices, analysis, what themes and quotes, like what themes they might. So, none of woman born shall harm Macbeth, have no spur to split the tide. I feel like the none of women born shall harm Macbeth, that's, I think, a quote from the Witches. I'd use that. I wouldn't use that as a primary quote. There's not really a whole lot to unpack there. That's why I say it like that. I definitely use that as a sprinkle quote for sure. I'd use that to put like context into your analysis. But that's more foreshadowing the fact that Macbeth is the name's completely lost, like completely skipped my mind, but that's foreshadowing the fact that Macbeth was killed by the guy that was born through a C-section, not through normal ways of birth. So that is more like foreshadowing things than anything else. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent. That's definitely ambition. 110%, that would be ambition. And I would describe that as imagery, because that gives you the picture of like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it makes me picture Macbeth on like a horse, and he's spurring the horse on. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if it gives you a picture of something, just class it as imagery. It's probably one of the easiest and most justifiable literary devices that you can use within your external exam. Could I represent the supernatural as a dark hallucinating force inducing wrong actions by using the dagger as symbolism? Let me just reread that again. Could I represent the supernatural as a dark hallucinating force? Yes. Inducing wrong actions? Yes. By using the dagger as symbolism? Yeah, 110%. I like that. I like that take a lot. The dagger is definitely symbolic. Same with blood. Same with sleep. Same with the hallucinations, like ghosts and things like that. Banquo's ghosts. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I would go with that. With the last quote, could I link that to choices and fate in a sense, especially with the last dot point you had on there? 110%. I think when it comes down to choices and fate and the idea that, your actions have consequences and that fate is inescapable, 110%, you could link that in there. Just wanted to ask, what subjects did you take in high school and how did you study for your subjects? I did 6 subjects, for those of you who want to know. General English, biology, chemistry, maths methods, absolutely horrible subject, history, modern history, and PE. Those are my 6. And yeah, I got an adjusted ATAR, 99.95. So I think PE, people are like, oh, like if you did PE, how'd you get an ATAR 99.95? Like it obviously got dropped, but the other subjects that I did still scaled up well, so that's fine. What are we doing tomorrow for English? Tomorrow's focus is going to be a focus on PE, sorry, not PE, God, you gotta have me thinking about something else. I just read the other comments, sorry guys. But not focusing on PE tomorrow. Don't make me giggle, guys, it's not fair. Okay, so what are we doing for tomorrow for English? We're looking at theses, how to create a good, solid thesis, and also essay structure, how to actually structure your body paragraphs. I think that if you have a solid essay structure that you can basically rinse and repeat for each exam question each paragraph, it makes it so much easier to actually focus on your analysis themselves. What time is it tomorrow? Tomorrow's 3 to 5, I think. Tomorrow is 3 to 5. Do make sure that you attend, because I'd love to see all of your names again. Yeah, tomorrow's 3 to 5. More importantly, tomorrow is really where the big guns come out, because you can know how to do quotes, you can know how to do themes, you can know how to do analysis, but actually incorporating those within a successful, well-structured body paragraph is something completely different. More importantly, having a good thesis is literally what sets you apart from everybody else. If you have a well thought out, well-structured, well-planned thesis, your markers know that from the get-go. And keep in mind that your thesis is probably one of the first things your markers mark you on. If you don't have a good thesis, that's going to impact the way that your marker views the rest of your writing for the entire essay, okay? So that's probably one of the most important things will be coming tomorrow. This is a question about future classes. When I was in the Masterclass, we signed up with a discount agent to make sure you can sign up for that price. So when it comes down to signing up to multiple masterclasses, which we'll go over in just a second, you just have to select General English as one of the masterclasses, and you'll get the discounted price. As long as you've got 3, or I think it's like 2 or 3 classes or something, then you'll get a discount. Okay. Actually, I think I read that question wrong. I think the discount for $18 is the early bird pricing. So even if you just sign up for General English, you'll get a discount there. But if you sign up for General English and Bio, you'll get multiple discounts.
Hey, Bronte,
Anyway,
I'll just jump in and answer that. So essentially for the QSH Mentor program, which is starting on Monday, you can select as many subjects you want. So we're offering 6 subjects for General English, Maths Methods, Specialist Maths, Physics, Biology, and Chemistry. And you can essentially pick a package which gets discounted the more subjects you sign up for. So essentially you can get one subject for 35, or you can go up and get, I think it's 5 subjects for 125. So that gets it really low down to, I think, $18 or even less than that per subject per week, which is a really great value. We've tried to offer you guys as a form of a pricing that's way less than conventional tutoring. So because we've been in your position as well, and we know that it's expensive and difficult in such a stressful period of time. So we're trying to get you the most you can get out of this program for the lowest price.
Perfect. Yeah, hopefully that summarizes your question there, Erin. Just before we move on to that side of things, I did want to answer Military's question. What will they be looking for in a conclusion paragraph? Will that be discussed tomorrow? That will be discussed tomorrow. Okay. So another thing, so also there was a question about divine right of kings as well, and any potential exam questions there. I feel as though divine right of kings is definitely going to be, say, a question between Malcolm and Macbeth. So you could have a question similar to, say, to what extent does Macbeth's downfall highlight or showcase the divine right of kings? It'd be pretty straightforward in that sense. I don't think they'd try and hide the theme from you that much, especially since divine right of kings isn't a common theme. I'm hoping that makes sense in terms of the type of exam questions they can ask you there. So anyway, as you guys realize by now, we have not covered nearly half of what would go into your external exam preparation. I had somebody mention or ask just before how I studied for my subjects. I actually had a tutor when I was your age. I had a tutor for English, biology, maths, everything like that. All of the subjects that I struggled with, I got support with. And that's kind of where, I think you guys have really taken the first step here and actually attending one of these masterclasses to understand what you don't know, okay? So many people especially around this time of year, they just give up. And that's so valid, but at the same time, there's still a tiny, tiny push to go for you guys to secure, your final exam results. If you put into perspective as well, I know with other subjects, think about all of the exams and assessments that you've done internally so far. Most of those are 50% so far of your internal mark. That means that for other subjects, for English it's different, but for other subjects, 50% of your marks are reliant on these external exams. English was 25%, but even still, it's a quarter of your mark on one exam, which is wild. So I think the next few weeks and how you actually prepare for things like this is going to be so, so important. And my best advice for you guys at this point in time is to use the support services that you have available to yourself, like the QSH Hub, like, tutors and things like that, to be able to explain to you the things that you don't know to really get yourself the best marks possible. I think as well, by working with tutors like myself who have been there, done that, who have graduated through the ATAR system, you have a much, much greater understanding of what could, what could possibly be on the external exam. Like I said, I've predicted word for word the exam questions for 3 years now, meaning that there has to be something about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the experience that really gives you, like, learning from somebody with experience seriously gives you an unparalleled step ahead of everybody else within your cohort. And if you can harness that, if you can pursue that, if you can actually use that in your external exam preparation, you're going to be unstoppable. So now we will be going over more of this content leading into the rest of the term. Now, what that's going to look like is we'll go over a little bit deeper into quotes, go over themes some more. There's really going to be a huge, huge focus on how to actually structure your essays as well in a way that works for you, as in, depending on how you prefer to write, depends on how you're going to respond to external exam questions. But within our future masterclasses, there'll definitely be a bit more of an individualized approach as to how you can actually approach these external exam questions and how you can actually unpack, and respond to the best of your ability. So as you've seen with Ollie's little pop-ups just here, you can see with general English, we've got 5 weeks of content planned for you guys. So can you write some predicted questions for this year? This is already on the books. It's already happening. It's already something that I'm thinking of. So yes, this is something that goes around my head all year. So I've got a few good ones, and that's what we'll be preparing for within those masterclasses. Now, you can see we've got 5 weeks worth of content, meaning we're going to take you all the way from first week of holidays through to literally this week. Like, masterclasses are starting this week, through the first week of holidays all the way through to your external exams. So that's 5 weeks worth of content that you guys can harness, and 5 weeks of support that you guys can use here as well. Now, within general English, as you can see, week 1, we're looking at main characters again. Week 2, minor characters, as in you're still going to be prepared for those more narrow questions, if that's where you prefer to write within your external. We'll be looking at thematic overviews twice, okay? So in our little overview there, it says power, gender, guilt, and supernatural, but there will be a lot more minor themes that go within those umbrellas as well, just so you guys are confident in how each of those themes can link back up to that umbrella, okay? And finally, in week 5, we'll be going through those structured essay reviews as well. So between each of these sessions, you guys will actually I'll actually give you guys a external exam question that I've personally curated with my own experiences. And you guys will actually be able to write to that external exam question. And with our classes, I'll actually be giving you guys personal feedback based on those responses. So it's a huge amount of value that you guys are getting within these masterclasses. Not only do you receive content that's relevant to what you're going through today, but also the personalized feedback based upon your exam responses, as in you guys have the option to do up to 5 external exam essays, and all of those get feedback based upon your responses. So would it be possible for you to have a copy of the quotes? Yes, 100%. You'll get a quote. You'll get all of those today from doing that little feedback form. So in terms of our timeline, guys, signups close tomorrow. Okay, we have our final general English masterclass tomorrow, 3 to 5 p.m. You guys will all be there, I'm hoping. But signups literally close tomorrow midnight, so there's not a whole lot of time to commit to this. And I encourage you, if you're a fast action taker, if this is something that you see yourself enjoying, if this is something that you've received, insight from, do join these masterclasses, because like I said, there's going to be an insane amount of value here for you guys as opposed to regular one-on-one tuition. And it's literally the exact same amount of support. So not only will there be content, but also exclusive access into 24/7 tutor support, as in I've been in your shoes. If you guys have like a question at midnight, I'll answer it. You know what I mean? Like I'm committed to seeing you guys succeed. I've been there. I've done that. Okay. Could you write out an example of 25/25 essay? I already have one of those. So yes, 110% we'll go over those. That'll be something that we'll go over tomorrow. Okay. And that's something that's been also moderated and marked by QCAA as well. So I know it's a 25 out of 25. Another thing, would you recommend writing and memorize a whole essay and adjust to fit the question? Yeah, essentially that's what I did to get my marks in general English. Yeah, I feel like that's like probably one of the best ways to do it. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people don't have like that amount of real estate in their brain to take up, and that's so fine. There's definitely other ways to approach this, and that's kind of where your study approach will differ from other people. But personally, that's exactly how I secured my marks. Can you show how to do this? Yes to everything. So good. So this, like, once again, these tips, these tricks, these techniques that you can actually incorporate within your own study revision will be within these masterclasses moving forward. Okay, now we like Ollie's just popped into the chat, 1.5 hour live and recorded masterclasses, as in if you can't make one masterclass, that's okay. You can still watch it in your own time. More importantly, if you want to go over things again, just for your own peace of mind, they're accessible to you guys around the clock, so you can watch them in your own time. You can go over things. And I think that really gives you guys the flexibility that you'll need in these next few weeks to succeed. You've also got access to, once again, the 24/7 tutor support, but also specialized resources. Now, a lot of those quotes and analysis that I showed you guys today actually come from one of our primary resources that we, that we give to students leading up into their external exam preparation. You'll have access to all of that plus more when it comes to signing up to these masterclasses. So practice papers as well, practice exam questions. And I think secondary to that actually comes the feedback as well for those who are involved within the masterclasses. It's one thing to write essay responses, but it's a completely different thing to actually get feedback based upon your response. Your teachers are busy at this point in time. It's time for you guys to look outside of that circle and see who else can support you. And that's where tutoring comes in, okay? So getting personalized feedback, having those daily accountability checks as well, huge, okay, to keep you guys on track, on the ball, keeping you going throughout the next few weeks. It's not easy, okay? I'm not going to lie to you and say these next few weeks are going to be a walk in the park, because they're not. They probably going to be hell for some of you, and that's so fine, because I've been there as well. But having somebody to lean on who's been there before makes an entire, like, makes a huge difference, because you can really rely on people like that for support and understanding as to, where to go, how to structure your study, how to actually take it day by day. Okay, so those daily accountability checks are going to be super important. And keep in mind, guys, like, this isn't something that's accessible to everybody. If you jump on this today, you will already be a step ahead of everybody else in your cohort. You will have said, you will have committed to the being able to, secure your exam success earlier than what somebody else would have. Okay. Now, Ollie, if you can answer Claire's question there, just to clarify the split in pricing.
Yep, so whichever payment package you sign up for, that's a weekly subscription, guys, but you can opt out at any time. So if you pay for the 35 and you go for next week and you find that you don't enjoy it or it costs too much money, you can unsubscribe at any time. But it is 35 per week. And then if you go for more subjects, that price that goes up, it then goes down per subject, is weekly.
Yeah. So say, Claire, you're doing general maths, bio, and general English. Which isn't actually on our little infographic there, but anyway, general English, general maths, and bio. If you sign up for all three of those subjects, you will get a discounted rate for every one of those subjects. Okay. Now, I'm not too sure if you guys have looked into the costs of traditional tutoring, but often you're looking at paying between $70 to $100 per hour of tuition. So this is significantly discounted. And when I tell you that you receive the exact same support as somebody who's getting one-on-one support, there's no difference. You get around the clock support, you get access to exclusive resources, you get access to 1.5 hour live and recorded sessions, daily accountability checks. It's essentially like having a tutor in your pocket on the go at all times. Like it would be hard to say no to. And so I think that, really, if you're serious about securing a success in external exam, then this is something that's seriously a no-brainer. Like the value that you're getting or the amount that you're paying versus tutoring, the traditional tutoring, is just, it's insane. And I'm really, really stoked to be able to have put together such a program with QSH, because, it really does mean that we can support and impact as many students as possible in securing their external exam success. So another thing as well, yeah, a lot more is going to be covered within our weekly sessions. Okay, so if there's anything that you didn't understand from today's sessions, rest assured they will be unpacked further. Obviously, in the in given times and things like that, we could only go over so much. But just before I move on, yeah, so tomorrow is our thesis and essay structure. So do make sure that you're here for tomorrow's session, 3 to 5 p.m. Book it in your calendars. Be here. Can I just get a little consensus in the chat? Who's coming to tomorrow's session? Out of people who have attended today, so there could be different people that attend tomorrow. Me, awesome. I want to know everyone who's coming. Me, awesome. I think I will. Claire, you must be there. You must be there, please. You got to see my beautiful face again. Oh, thank you, Claire. I'm glad I could convince you. Awesome. Because yeah, tomorrow is going to be super, super important in terms of, just for me. Stop it, you. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be so important in terms of essay structure and thesis. Okay, two most important aspects of your external exam prep. So another thing that I wanted to get a little bit of a vibe on is, at the start of our session, I asked you guys how you were feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 for English mocks. Has this session changed anything for you? How are you feeling now after our session? Drop a number, 1 to 10, 1 being, really bad, 10 being on top of the world. I want to see how you guys are feeling after our session today, because that really gives me an insight into how well you guys have understood everything. 8 out of 10, 8, how good? Oh, we're getting lots of 8s. 8's are my lucky number, guys. How did you know? That's so good to see. So good. I love that. Now, I guess another thing as well. Thanks, Jay. You're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you guys for showing up. I think that's something that I don't say enough, is like, I've been in your shoes. I've had to ask for tutoring. I've had to ask for support, and it paid off. It paid off so well. The fact that you guys are even here today, who you've showed up, you've not just showed up for yourself, you showed up for your ATAR. Like, I think that's the most, one of the biggest takeaways that you guys can have today is, like, by showing up for yourself, by showing up consistently, you will see the results. There's nothing stopping you. And external exams are so scary. Like, I've been there. I've done that for 4 years now. But yeah, I think that if you can, be consistent, use the support services around you, and more importantly, learn from people who have already been there, you're going to be unstoppable. Now, just before I let you all go, are there any questions, any other questions that anybody has regarding what we've been through today, the pricing schedule, anything like that, from our discussion today? Do drop them into the chat, because I would like to see how you guys are feeling. And more importantly, make sure you fill out that form that Ollie has submitted within our chat, because that's what will give you access to the recordings and to the notes from today's session. So that includes everything we went through, the quotes, the literary devices, the words for characters, everything like that. Do fill out that form, because that's the only way you're going to get the resources. Okay. we need to get your emails and things like that to actually send the resources out. So that's where all of that will take place. Now, do we have any other questions, or are we all good? Also, any feedback, drop your feedback. I'd love to see it. I love to see it, how you guys have felt during the session. What are your thoughts? This is the most important part, the most nerve-wracking part for me as well. It's fine. I'm sure you guys liked it. I loved it. Oh, stop it. All good. Love. Love, love, love. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. I like how you went through key quotes. I like how you ask questions. I think that's probably one of the best things about a masterclass like this is like you can just ask as many questions as you want. I'm just going to answer them. That's what I'm here for. So good. So good. You definitely went through some quotes that I hadn't got in class. Love that. That's what I'm here for. Beautiful. This was very helpful. I love that. Love that so much. How good. How good indeed. Well, for a Saturday, you guys definitely turned up. I'm really proud of you all. So good. So good. A lot of people, well, I mean, I know I would have still been probably sleeping when I was your age. So go team. Proud of us. We got it done. And now you could go ahead and enjoy the rest of your Saturday and know that, you've actually made a step towards making some progress. Academic comeback is on. Yes, it is. That's the spirit. See you tomorrow. I will see you guys all tomorrow. Same me, just different time, 3 to 5 p.m. Okay? I love that. I think that's going to be my new motto. Academic comeback is on. On. Bye. Bye, Claire.